Hello and welcome to Team of the Week. We brought this back for 2022, and I say we because there's a whole gaggle of us now. I don't know why I refer to us as a group of geese, but that's gonna have to work, right?
Quack, 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 quack.
Is that the sound geese make, Alec? I think
they usually do
honk. That's a little
they
close.
fly. Yeah.
Something like that.
There's a literal team in the EU called Honk after geese, so that would have been my first go-to. But yeah, I sort of did this last year a little bit, but I figured I'd bring it back considering we actually have weekly games and not weeks upon qualifiers that go into other qualifiers and stuff. In any case, we're going over the North American teams, basically going up nominees for each of the roles: Sentinels, Controllers, Duelists, and picking out who the best 5 players were from North American Challengers Qualifiers 1. It's a long-ass name. And Mimi's helping me co-host this. She's going to have her players to nominate, and the special guest is Vansilli, who we didn't record earlier, pretended to be Vansilli because we got the time.
We wouldn't do that.
Nobody needs to see that ever, so that's staying in cold storage. But we're going to start with you, Vans, Sentinel player. You get to sort of lead, and we'll fill in some of the gaps of other nominations for who the best Sentinel player was from the North American qualifiers.
So you guys are already putting me in the hot seat because at first I was like, okay, I'll put my list in. Here's my player, and at the same time, everybody's gonna be like, well, you only play one map, and it's gonna have to be Steel of T1. And here's my justification of why I like Steel on Chamber was that he's unstoppable on maps like Split. Actually, the only map that he plays. If you've watched throughout the qualifier throughout the weekend, every single person, whether it's trying to flash him or trying to jiggle peek him or trying to dry peek him in a duel, he would always win with the operator or the tour de force. But the other justification as well is if you're looking at how they play Icebox, they also give that role to 7. But the way that 7 places his utility on that map gives me a very similar style as to when Steel used to play Killjoy on that map for 100 Thieves. So I'm pretty sure he blessed down some positions that 7 could play if Steel didn't have to play a Sova and was playing a Sentinel. So later on for T1, if they do change their roster roles or their agent roles, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be surprised to see Steel back on that chamber on these maps, and he's unstoppable for that reason.
Yeah, and I think Steel looked really good, especially when he was lifted from the IGL duties. I mean, bringing in David Denis as the IGL to step up to the plate there, I think added a lot of flexibility to the squad. I mean, we saw him pop off when he had that added flexibility. In the Enforcement series against TSM, before that fell flat, top of the board, I love the way he plays the agent on Split, right? Getting aggressive up mid, taking those risks. But at the same time, Alex, he's not playing it on every map, and I don't know how true of a Sentinel player it is, but still, I can respect some Steel action.
I mean, you sprinkle in a bit of his 100 Thieves days with as a Sentinel KO kind of thing. It still works out.
Yeah. Well, I think I would have to pivot the same direction for my choice for Sentinel around someone who is just kind of abusing the hell out of KO, and that's Wardell, because technically I can pick him as a Sentinel now, which feels wrong, but he was playing the role this entire time. Every single game, Wardell was on the chamber, and he looked good doing it. Funnily enough, the agent that was built to ops pretty darn well, and I saw Wardell getting a little extra flexibility. Some of his aggression, he cooled it off at times. He knew when to be that side anchor, but he still had the flexibility off the rendezvous, and with that jet role being filled in by others on his teams to just kind of set that role as a rifle, just let him be the op crutch that we know, that we love. And in that, I think that any team that is to pick him up in our hypothetical team here as a Sentinel just gets so much fragging power, also just gets a player with a really solid head on their shoulders, and one who, no matter the role, is going to perform.
Wait. So the first 2 picks ever on this for any player across all of them are players from T1 and TSM, this qualifier, and also Steel. And what year are we? Are we still in 2020 talking about these guys? I think it's I guess that's the big question, right? Is just for these guys, they weren't on qualifying teams. I think naturally we're going to lean to the version 1s, the X sets and stuff when it comes to their players, because they're the ones that qualified for challenges, right?
Yeah.
I'm assuming that they weren't the reason, certainly not for T1, the reason why they didn't qualify in the first place, right? But do you feel confident with T1 and TSM's chances for this upcoming qualifier? Certainly these players being the difference makers?
T1, yes. TSM maybe not as much.
No.
I think the thing is with Wardell, you were mentioning it, Mimi, because Wardell doesn't have to play as aggressive as he used to, and he hasn't been playing as aggressive. He's been more like almost like the last man standing clutcher kind of way, where we saw that ace happen on Fracture too. But I think it's also because of those role changes. Now that you're actually putting Corey on that jet, and Corey's going to be the one that's going to try to get those entries and those first bloods and creating space. Then you have Wardell behind that's going to try to support to play post plants or to try to clutch. Then it works in that style, but I still feel that because we've seen Wardell, and because Mimi said that he's played Wardell in every single map, with exception of one on Icebox, it just pigeonholes, I think, TSM into those very roles that doesn't allow enough depth for them to do that well, in my opinion, in the next two open qualifier number 2.
Yeah, I don't
TSM
think
and lack of depth is what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Sounds familiar.
Well, the team went from Wardell go kill everyone to Wardell go kill everyone on Chamber. So, you know, they're innovating. They're fixing things up. I don't think TSM are going to qualify, to be honest, but I still think Wardell is going to frag out of his mind. And if I can remove him, separate him from TSM, I'll still pick him aside. Although, I want to hear from you, Ryan. Who's your choice for the Sentinel?
I feel like I've got the cleanest one to go for, that being Net. I don't know too much about the player, at least before these qualifiers, so I feel like Net was a player that, with the whole guard roster, just looking at and going, this could be interesting. You've got players like Trent, who are very new and relatively fresh to the scene. Sire player, who took me 4 days to realize he changed his name back to Sire player and wasn't still Spider. I think all of the players on the guard, despite them going to the losers bracket, still deserve all of those spots to be like nominated on the list, but I think Net was the most surprising. And I think the easiest way to like sum up what makes him great is, you're looking to learn how to play not only the Chamber but the Killjoy. He is the player to watch, because I found like all of his utility really straightforward. It wasn't like he was having to be like Nats, like overthinking, having to create a whole new version of himself to play those roles. It was just strong fundamental stuff. And I think you could say that about the whole guard roster, but that mixed with Net's like insane aim and the fact that his Chamber had huge pop-off moments, I think for me is one of the more outstanding players. But I don't know if there's necessarily a player from version 1 or XSET that also plays the central role that would have been worth nominating over Steele and Wardell, to be fair. But I don't know what you guys think about like Net and also the other 3 Sentinel players from the teams who qualified.
Yeah, well, I think Net is another good pick. Actually, we've seen his clutch on that 4v1 on Haven. Net overall, I think pretty sure comes from like Teal Seam with all like the young fraggers from like 7 and whatnot. And then you're asking that question, if Teal Seam actually stuck together into the current open qualifiers, do you think they would have made it actually into a deep run into that top 4 of the qualify? I feel that they would have probably had a pretty good dark horse run, kind of like Team X or Flick Baiters or whoever that made it, that's unsigned, that made it super far in the open qualifier runs. I think Net's a great pick. I mean, Whippy's the other one, I think, for version 1. And, Whippy's had great performances when before Iceland, before he actually had to get replaced because he couldn't get the visa. And then coming back into the regular season, trying to qualify to Masters 2, Masters 3, like he had some decent performances, but was still a little bit quiet because I think just version 1 as a whole was really quiet, trying to find their identity as well. But I think now that you see how version 1 performed in this open qualifier, Whippy could be one of those players you could pick. But overall, it's because you just have so many good other Sentinels that really popped off throughout that open qualifier too, not discrediting the skill set that Whippy has.
Yeah. I think that just like it's hard to ignore the individual impact that the 2 Chamber players that me and you shouted out, Vans.
Yeah.
But I think overall Net is kind of the guy who had the most impact to his team actually winning games. Just the amount of clutches that this man was pulling off was wild, especially for such a young player. It's his first big shot on a roster. He looked really good.
I do feel that when it comes to Net versus Wardell versus Steele, there's a clear winner from the 3 that we've put forward. Can we at least all agree on Net for now? We could always bring in some of these players that you mentioned from like version 1. Aaron as well looked really good on XSET, considering he's finding himself in a new role. Yeah, Android as well for NRG had some insane moments. Let's tentatively put in Net there for now. What about controllers? You were speaking about version 1, actually, Vansilli. I think there's a pretty obvious nomination that comes from the team.
Yeah, definitely Xander, right? Xander is the latest addition coming into this roster, and we were talking about identity crisis for version 1. We tried to have some calling from Effie's at some point, some calling from Zelsis, but that kind of slowed things down in terms of like their skill set overall. I just feel that Xander coming into this roster allows so much potential and unlocks actually Zelsis to be able to just frag out, and he just popped off the way that he did during the open qualifiers. But for Xander himself, I think he's a great IGLer to be able to understand how to move these pieces for version 1, how to move his players. But at the same time, for me, I know a lot of players are talking about like, or a lot of people talk about great Astra lurking and IGL calling for somebody like, or just as an Astra player in general. But I feel that Xander is really, really good as an anchor player too, for a controller player. So he's able to lock down A site on Ascent when they were able to play those maps. Very, very difficult to take him down. I think he's probably one of the best Astra controllers, IGLs that we currently have since maybe Nitro, Def, and Valiant, actually, even from the Guard.
Yeah, I kind of want to take that. And sure, Xander, he's great and all. He's really good, but he's a young player. He's relatively inexperienced. Sure, he has MCE helping him to learn. He has a couple other players who have been around the block and have called in the past. But when we're talking about a player, when I think of my controller role, I want someone who can be a complete rock of the team, who can be a steadfast IGL and take control on that Astra role. I think of my vanities. I think of, well, my Defs. You brought him up. Def is my nomination for our player of the week in this role. Mainly because of his calling. His calling is really, really good. His team is young. You have Cryo, who again, this is one of his first big shots. He's 18. Zekin, I think he might have just turned 17. He might still be 16. He is super young. This is his first really big team. It's a lot of these players that need to be molded. And well, him in combination with Psycho have done such a good job at that. The instant upgrade of success when he was brought into this roster was massive because he is an IGL that really does take control, working those mid-round decisions, working the early round while still leaving room for other players to step up, to get in the conversation. That's a lot of what Zekin has done too. He used to call on previous rosters. He's helping out in that way. Def is a guy that's open to new ideas, but also can keep things steadfast, can make the decisions instantly, and put his team in the right direction. And for how long he's been calling, both in Valorant and CS, I never see him getting stagnant. I never see these calls being repeated or getting predictable. And on top of that, the performances that he puts out on Astra are phenomenal. And maybe it's not quite as high as Xander, because Xander boasts a ridiculous scoreline when he's playing in on this agent. But the thing is that we kind of make up for that by how well I see his utility meshing in with the team for Def. He always has a grab well, always has a stun. If Zekin is pushing, if it's Zekin on the KO and you're getting cryo cells aggressive, there's already that well-placed piece of util. And the same is true of Xander. I just feel like Def has been doing it a step above, and he has the experience to boast, as well as just having a really good and frankly, a really, really clean tournament run for XSET.
I think they're both really good shouts. I feel like my nomination, I like watching him quite a lot. That being Hayes from NRG. I think he's the perfect kind of player that NRG really needed. I think you saw a lot more tightness in the play, similar to what you were saying about Def, actually. I think we saw Hayes being able to do similar stuff, like good mid-round calling. I do think that the XSET NRG game was probably one of the better, stronger series. Like, it was really tight. It was very close. There was no casting on it, unfortunately, but it was like 13-11 scoreline on Breeze, I'm pretty sure, and really could have gone either way in those cases. I think for me, though, the question that really defines this of whether Xander gets it or not is Xander's addition to version 1 the reason why they look a lot tighter and stronger now, do you think? Or did this squad always have that capability beforehand when they had Vanity, for example, and then he left for Cloud9? Is Xander coming into that roster the reason why version 1 came through without dropping him out?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at that roster, like I said, when Xander comes in, everybody's able to stick to their role and focus on that, right? Not trying to figure out who's going to be IGLing from tournament to tournament and from match to match. And I think you raise that question at the same time as maybe not necessarily just Xander. If you're looking at the rest of the roster for version 1, like, we came into this event with the question mark, what type of Penny are we going to see? What type of Effies are we going to see? Is it going to be the same Effies that was able to consistently support like Gen G, or then support version 1 and be that clutch master? And he was actually for the open qualifier number 1. And the same thing for Penny. Penny popped off. I love saying the word pop off because everybody just played super fucking well. But it is what it is. Penny, I think, played the tournament super well. And I think that's also thanks to just the guidance that you have from Xander. Yes, he's a young IGL, but you can already see the level of comfortability that all of these players currently have in their roles, in their positions. And if he's young now and they're able to do this without dropping a map, imagine when he's going to get to the point where he's going to be Death's Age.
I am leaning towards Xander on this one. It's the
I don't know.
IGL factor. I don't. Yeah, it's a tough one because I think that who's going to be the player that has most impact once we get into challenges? I think depth, because what happens when
here's the
version
thing.
one look a bit worse?
Here's the thing. If we have a version 1 versus XSET head-to-head, it is a match we've seen before. XSET has won it before. And I think if we run it back, I think Def can out IGL Xander. They have played against each other before when it was, I believe, I swear I recall a match when Xander was still back on his previous roster. And I'm pretty sure that XSET won that out. I just think that Def brings a level of experience, and in his team, he has it more put together. I think that when I'm talking about this role and when I'm talking about choosing our IGL, it's about not just the performance in the server, but it's outside too. I think the mentorship that Def provides and the player development aspects that he adds along with the coach for the team really gives him a lot of value. And I'm not underwhelming Xander at all, because I think he was probably the biggest reason that version 1 did as well as they did, besides players like Effie's just absolutely playing out their mind. But I still lean to Def on this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it in as Def. I think
it's not a bad pick.
Three of us, we can have the sort of majority vote, but Xander in the future is something that I'm very excited to see more of.
He can get there. I mean, I want to see the XSET. I want to see the Def Xander head to head, because I think they're. I also want to see the Vanity Xander head to head.
Oh, that would be actually quite nice. I'd be down for that. And I'm not mad at the Def pick. I mean, I've found a Def since he's been IGLing for complexity in Counter-Strike.
Yeah.
Being the way that he does, right? He was that clutch master. He was last person standing. I remember playing on Mirage and still clutching and bringing games to overtime. These games right now in Valorant, he's able to call, but also lurk very well for the team to really turn their rounds over for XSET. So yeah, fine. I'll give
for it.
Oh yeah, exactly. I'll give Xander a close second. I'll give Xander a close second for sure.
Speaking of that sort of player, we mentioned him a little bit there. If we move on to the Initiators, which could be the Silver full time or the Flex, really. There is a Flex option, but that's more Initiated. You'll just whatever. It's for whatever we need it to be. I think for pure initiating, I really liked watching Effie's this event. I think that we really saw a high from him from Reykjavik last year. But ever since then, I don't feel like we've seen that same kind of player up until this event. And it similar to what I've said about Net, it doesn't need to be too out there. It doesn't need to be insane stats or insane performances. It's just the role that he fulfills on a team. And I think that if you're just watching through some of the games for version 1, there's nothing that's too out there. It's not holy shit, this team is playing insane, super quick, super insane individual skill. It was just a much tighter, well-constructed roster that, when you look at the scorelines for the games that they've played, absolutely breezed through their qualifiers. I do wonder to an extent if they were as tested as some of the other teams that were on the other side of the bracket. But I do think the version 1 100% deserved to qualify, and I think Effie's is at least deserving of a nomination for that sort of silver role. Because again, it wasn't too out there. It wasn't Aleko that we saw a little bit of. It was just that kind of straightforward, supportive silver, which is nice to see in NA for sure.
I want to put someone forward who's a little more of a battle Sova, who's a little more of getting in the face, getting aggressive, and that's EU. EU has been, basically the antithesis of an EU Sova, in that this guy is one of the first up to face. He's one of the first to be pushing in, helping Sam on those initial entries. And the reason I pull him out is because of the dichotomy he has created with his jet player. There is always that well-placed dart. There is always the shock darts in the right position, and there's always him to back up for the trade frag or to come in for the clutch. He boasts a really, really high ACS consistently for a Sova, pushing him into those 225 to 250 ranges depending on the match. His impact in that way is huge, and in a very, very aggressive team like NRG, that role becomes even more important, which I guess is why I'm I'm just kind of trying to build like my all-star, they can shoot the guns really well roster with like picking a Wardell and an EU. But I think that, well, he maybe isn't the quintessential Sova, I have the best utility ever. He still finds that. He still has that. And he has the depth to be able to be hyper-aggressive, to be able to frag, and to be more than just that supportive role.
He is the most valuable player, I think, in North America right now. He reminds me of Leo for Guild. Sort of like, maybe not on the best team, but like he is the player that you spend up to the millions to buy out, I think. Like, EU is the future of this game in the same way that I think Leo is on track to be one of the best players in the world. It's the same trajectory for EU, but it really depends on how the rest of NRG does. Because like you mentioned, that he can be the supportive role. His timings with like recon dats are really good to catch people off, and he can 1v3 clutch when he needs to as well, which is very hard to find. Not really you'd see out of FBs necessarily as consistently, but I do think that, yeah, EU is...
Compared to Crashies? What do you think compared to Crashies, though?
Okay, I'm gonna say this. I think that what EU is, in a way, as a Sova, is kind of a jack of all trades kind of guy. And why I like him on this role is the pure flexibility. He's not a hard Hiko or Effie's, I'm gonna play in the spawn, I'm gonna wait and clutch eventually and probably get it done. He is a guy who can be that first up entry. He can be a little bit lurkier, and he can flex around on the rolls, which is why I get impressed with him. He can also kind of diff other Sovas, like other really strong Sovas when he's head to head. Even though NRG lost in their series against XSET, I still felt like the information game was being won out over BCJ on the Sova. Just the timing on utility, his kind of preserving the drone sometimes towards the later round to get those rehits on in. When it works, it looks really, really good. And it felt like in these crucial swing rounds, a lot of the time, even if you don't directly see it in the kills, EU was that catalyst, which is why he was so impressive to me in this series. And Crashies, he's a great player. He really is, and he has a huge clutch potential. I see the two as quite similar, but he didn't play in this qualifier. So no can do.
Crashies is not that good where we can nominate him for Team of the Week when he didn't play. He's good, but he's not that good.
I'm actually going to nominate Leo for Team of the Week. We're going to import him to NA.
But I'm just saying,
Chronicle
if you're, I was just saying, because if Ryan thought that EU was like going to be the most valuable Sova potentially in the world right now, I was like, okay, well, what about the Leos? What about the Crashies or whatnot, right? But especially for somebody who's been around the scene for quite a long time for EU, that really needed his moment to shine, because I think the first blip of the radar was with T1 Academy, if I'm not mistaken, back in like the early days.
Like brimstone for them.
Exactly. So it changed for a bit since then, and I'm pretty happy to see where EU's at. But the way that Mimi's been describing EU is pretty much the same way that I would describe the person that I'm nominating actually as my Sova of this event, and that's going to have to be Trent, right? When we actually hear about Trent, the only thing that we knew about Trent really before going to this event was, like everybody was saying, formerly known as Habib. That's it, right? He grinded. He's a ranked demon. He didn't have too much experience playing into like professional teams. He has his chance now to play with the guard. I got to cast him during the NSG Open number 14, where they actually beat T1 and ended up winning that event for the guard too. And I was like, wow, this Trent kid, he has what it takes. Another one of those super young fraggers that's coming into the scene, but that leaves a mark. Like, that already is like, hey, I'm here to play and watch me. And you have to pay attention to Trent going into the main event when you're going to see the guard play. I think he's very, very similar to EU in that style. He's also a great clutcher as well. He's had one less clutch than EU, actually looking into the event for the last weekend qualifier, but had a higher ACS, inputting a lot of damage with his shock darts. Actually, his shock darts are really, really good to look at as well. He understands the game so well at such a young age to be able to get these clutch situations, these timings on the recon darts as well. So I think he's playing under a great system with MCE and Valen. On top of that, Valen new to IGLing for the team, and you still have somebody like Trent that's able to play so well. I think this kid has so much potential, where he could even surpass EU in any month.
I do have a
suggestion. But has he yet?
Not.
So my suggestion was, I feel
sample size
like
is small.
It's likely that when we get into the week 1s, week 2s of challenges, because that's how it is round robin, that's why we're able to do this. I feel like EU, and to a lesser extent Effie's name, is going to come up a lot. I'm not necessarily saying let's give it to Trent because he's not going to be on this list when we actually get into the qualifier. It's more what you said, the trajectory that this guy has been on, and also recently was announced to be full-time on the guard where he was trialing before, right? So I almost feel like nobody has had a better week than him. Maybe not on the server necessarily, but from going to a player that was just grinding it out to now qualifying first time with a new and fresh team.
So you think he's honeymooning?
I don't think it's honeymooning. I just think that, like, regardless of what was happening in the server or not, I think Trent deserves it based on what he was able to do in such a short space of time. I don't necessarily think he's going to have the same ceiling as certainly a player like EU or Crashies or whatever, but you never realistically know because it's still so soon. I just think that Trent has had an amazing week, and I almost just want to give him the spot on the team for that reason alone.
I feel like in the players that we've looked at thus far, we've pulled out a lot of players who have been around for a while, right? If say we're picking into a Def, if we're picking into who do we decide on the first one for Net? It's another young player in Net. But I think that having another one of those newer guys to step on up, especially another one of those players that really can be a difference maker and can rise to a new ceiling is great. It's really cool and all. But at the end of the day, I look at what was the actual performance of the team as a whole and what was the actual performance of this individual. And I don't know if Trent will keep it up. He hasn't proven me consistency yet. And I really want to see it. I believe in him. I think he can find the consistency. But the other two options for us, Effys has done this on an international level. I know he wasn't my pick, but Effys has done this in Iceland. Even when the team was faltering, Effys was still stepping up to the plate and being the best clutcher pretty much in NA for a lot of these games. Like, I feel like you cannot ignore that experience and that proven success. He's also a player that is previously IGL'd, so it can help add into the conversation in that way. I just think that Effys, well, maybe he doesn't have the same exact depth as EU or the same raw skill and young potential as Trent. He's already shown us what he can do, and he will keep doing that damn well.
Yeah, I'm just looking forward to more Trent aim lab flick of the day. That guy is gonna bring out a lot of these.
The only negative, I know that Effys was my pick, but the only negative was the breach left a little bit to be desired. But then again, version 1 won those games cleanly. That I think it was less.
True.
Effys played poorly. It's just Effys didn't have much to do. And I think a lot of the times where low ACS, it was kind of that. Yeah, I'm happy to give it to Effys if everybody else can agree on that. Because again, I feel like EU was still great. Was it the ceiling that we expect from him? Not necessarily, but I'm sure he's going to hit it at some point through challenges. So I'm excited that NRG qualified. The other rule I was going to say about this is like having 2 players on a team out of the 5. So even if we did bring in Trent, we can't bring in any more guard players if we have Net. It's not really an important thing, but I guess it's just a nice rule to change stuff up. What about, like, are we all happy on that? Are we at least able to agree for now? We can always change it at the end before we lock them in.
I'll agree for now.
All right.
Because we might have, like, 2 other version 1 players from the last 2. Speaking of which, Flex, who have you got, Mimi?
I've got a bit of a spicy one from my favorite Animal Crossing organization, Accru. And that is Mr. Kompeki. And Accru didn't qualify. We can put that asterisk in front. They haven't proven that they can make it in, but they looked really good in the games they were playing. They took down TSM 2-0, and I think a lot of that had to be what Kompeki was doing as an individual. Previously for this squad, he was always the duelist, right? He was playing on that jet. He was insta-locking that. Now, in this Accru squad, he is switching things up like crazy. He's playing a lot of Sky. He's playing a little bit of Chamber, a little bit of KO, a little bit of Sage, and he's also playing the Neon, which looked really, really good. This was the first team to competitively implement Neon, and I loved what I saw. The aggression on the extremities of Fracture, breaking down the timings. They did it really well. The retakes, constantly contesting, running all the way out arcade, taking space over towards Dish and allowing the retakes to happen from that position. And on the attacking side, having stuns that were always really well placed was sick. When he plays the Sky, he's also just consistent with utility. He can frag when he's on that agent as well. And then the Chamber and the KO also look pretty good in his hands. When I'm talking about a flex, I want someone who's not just a Sky player, not just a second secondary duelist. I want someone who can really play a ton and do whatever the team needs. And I think that Konpeki showed that he can do well on pretty much any agent, and then he can also innovate with the addition of Neon.
I mean, that's the whole thing, right? It's just I didn't expect much Neon to be played, nor to have such an impact on a map like Fracture, where that is now the meta. I could see everybody moving over to play Neon.
I think it will be.
Some of the setups that people have shown me with the stuns, how quickly Neon could get into position. The one round where I can't remember, I think it might have been the guard that they were playing, but they were outside of A main on Fracture. They're getting stuns, they're getting slowed, they're getting like grabbed and paint shelled. And in that time, Konpeki on the Neon zooms down B main to flank in behind him with the ultimate. Like getting those kind of timings on people and on a map where you are almost promoted to push on the defense, there is no better agent. And the utility that they could provide, I wasn't really a strong believer on Neon as an agent choice in a lot of different scenarios, but I do think that Accrue are right in the book.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, and I think Konpeki's leading on that. As a player and as a team overall, I think of individuals that nobody really had high expectations for, like playing on Equinox previously, all those kind of teams. Now that they're turning up and looking tier 1 level, not all down to Konpeki mind, but he's the glint, I suppose, in the eye of what makes his team great.
I'm thinking that's against TSM, and which is quite surprising why TSM even chose to play Fracture against Accrue on that map.
They did a little bit of trolling. They did a little bit of trolling.
I think they had a KO in there, right, for TSM, just to make sure that they could try to counter Konpeki with the dash.
They were trying
to.
Chamber.
Yeah, I think it was like a full counter pick that just didn't pan out to be in the playbook for TSM of how they thought it was gonna play out rather. So good on Accrue to be able to play so well, despite everybody seeing their strat book and how maybe one-dimensional it could be, to be like, oh, it's so unorthodox playing with the Neon, and then suddenly we know how to counter it. No, you can't. They still did a great job for Accrue to actually beat TSM on that map. But if we have to go at flex agents or flex players to continue on that topic, I think for me it's going to be Jonah P. Jonah P of the Guard. I think has been amazing right now for the Guard, actually, so far. Before going into the NSG Opens and also to this qualifier, when I think about Jonah P, I always thought about like a Sova role. Like he's always playing Sova. I was like, yeah, Jonah P's a great Sova. But I missed a gap. There was a point where he was playing for Immortals where he is also playing a couple of flex agent. He plays some Sage for the Immortals. He's able to play some Sky, which he currently plays right now for Guard. Also plays KO on this map as well, for the team as well. And his flashes for Sky is freaking amazing. We talk about self-efficiency for Sky, where before when that agent came out, it's like it's going to be great for players like Sabrosa that wants to flash himself, that wants to like play for himself, and it's going to work quite well. But I think Jonah P really shines into like these retake plays under the utter chaos, where he just runs into the site, dodges everything, flashes around the corner, and every time that he flashes, look at his point of view when he swings out. There's always like 2 or 3 players that are blinded, and he just aim labs everybody. Like just 1, 2, 3, pops everybody off. Super easy kills because he has these great timings and played the KO very, very well for this team too. And if needed be, then because of his experience of the other agents that he currently has under his belt for the other organizations that he played for, then it's going to work out quite well if the Guard wants to switch things up into the agent pool as well.
Terrible time to take a drink there.
Okay, I'll join you.
I was just like,
that is a comically large water bottle, Vance.
I got to make sure I drink my 2 liters a day.
Oh
but don't worry, I do not wake up at 8 a.m. You guys,
this is such a boomer thing to have, Alex.
You guys gave me a ring at 1:30 p.m. Today.
Don't
and I'm
talk
like...
to me till I've had this much coffee.
Exactly.
Don't talk to me.
The worst part is you said, like, it's such a boomer thing, and I'm sat there going, that's amazing. I really that's so good.
There you go.
I think for Flex, for me, it was between 2 players who I actually found a map of them facing off against each other. And so I looked at Trex versus Zekken. And initially it was on Breeze, it was KO. It's an agent that both these players were getting still adjusted to on a map that people have only started to really start playing KO after Champions, like Ascend, doing it and stuff like that. Originally it was Trex that was winning it out on top. Zekken looked a bit too structured, a bit too like problematic and rigid because of that, like rotating to try and find the action on defense, 0 point in the right place to shut down a Silver Eldrun. But eventually, like, we start to see Exet have a bit more comfortability around the map. And that's where I think Zekken came alive. That if you put him in a structure, it can be a bit too rigid for him to have his full advantage. But if you give him a bit of freedom, if you can break it down to more of a mid round, he absolutely thrived on the KO. It wasn't amazing on the Agent, but it was still decent considering that it was still an adjustment that Exet were making and at least playing in big officials and having big impact from there. The raise was the thing that I think took my interest because I mean, one of us has picked Cryo for Jet, no doubt. Like, otherwise we're all trolling. But I do think that the reason why Cryo looks so good is because Zekken helped him look so good. It was both of them together that worked so well. And I really liked how he approached Raze on a map like Split, where, yeah, sure, you have the boom bot through mid and all that kind of stuff, but it was so close quarters in your face Raze. Like, oh, we spotted them on the other side of a smoke on Mail. I'm just going to showstopper them, and they're about here right in front of me. It's that kind of like instant impact that you find from that. He's trading off Cryo. Cryo's trading off him. He is the unsung hero, I think, from why Exet looked phenomenal alongside, like, obviously Cryo, who had an absolute worldie of a tournament. I think Zekken is more to thank for that than anybody.
Yeah. Those two together are going to be very, very scary for the future of Exet, which is why, again, like you were talking about somebody that picked Cryocells, I picked Cryocells, right? For the Jet, I think everybody had that question mark as to, like, everybody's running on that hype of Cryocells. Great addition, huge upgrade. No offense to Pure R or Pure Redfish, and Exet's just going to look amazing. And they have, actually, to tell you the truth, right? And it is that combination. It's not only just of Cryocells, but it's a combination of Cryocells and Zekken. You talk about the in-your-face. Cryocells is playing a lot of in-your-face Jet. Very fast, very quick, very witty. And when it comes down to that, too, you have to be snappy on landing those shots as well. And I was utterly impressed with the way that Cryocells is moving around, especially with this Blade Storm, too. He is quick moving around with that ult around that site. Around the sites, actually, for everything that he tries to claim. Very, gonna call it an esports Doug thing, very crispy when it comes down to, like, throwing those kunais. Very instant headshots that he's able to just open up rounds for Exet. I think it changes the whole Exet style of, like, or different layers that they could have for this roster now, right? They could default, they could play slow, but when it's time to play super quick, man, these two kids have it.
I hate that comp on Split. Like, I hate the double duelist, double controller. Like, they have no information. So they just
it works, though.
It works.
Yeah,
it works.
That's the frustrating part of it. Like, it's such a nasty comp in regards to the firepower, but you miss out on so much, like, info that they have to just go and run up mail to find.
And that's why you got to be snappy. Yeah, that's why you got to be snappy. So.
And it works for them. But, okay, let's pull back to this kind of conversation as a whole. Because I think I really like Zekken as a player. I've been a Zekken fan since he was, like, playing for Phoenix 1 and getting scammed out of all of his money. But
yeah.
I think that as the flex role, I really like him. I think he works well in conjunction on that secondary duelist. But I haven't seen as much out of him. I'm a sucker for innovation. I'm a sucker for new stuff, for new tech. Give it to me. And that's why I've really liked Accrue, because for what people consider a mid-tier 2-team, they pulled out something fresh. They pulled out something new. And I think that Konpeki has been a big part of that. I have seen him play more roles successfully than I really have for many other players. He can pick up as the duelist. He can be the entry Jet. He can be the KO. He can be the Sage. He can be the Sky. He can be the damn Neon now. And I think when I'm talking about a true flex, when I'm talking about someone who can do it all and frag and be good in all those situations, it's still, even if they didn't qualify, I'm like, I don't know. My Konpeki is just feeling lovely. My Accrupium is still out of this world.
Accrustralis?
I think if there's a player and a team that didn't qualify that deserves to really be on this list, it is Accrue and it is Konpeki. Because let's be honest, like, it could certainly, like, as we go into this week, which no doubt by this video comes out we'll be into, it wouldn't surprise me if Accrue, I know you have them for qualifying for next time, Mimi, but I could just see them not having that same success of just going out again, right? Like, this could have been at least a week to show what this Accrue team can do. And regardless of whether they qualify for challenges or not, personally, they have the capability to 100%. it at least gets them on everybody's radar, which reminds me of like LG and Exet this time last year. It's the same kind of thing, and I think Accru, nobody really sort of knew them as an organization or whatever. They're now looking to be a potential underdog team across all of these tier 1 teams at NA.
I will also say, let me actually put an argument in favor of Vansilli, because if we already have Def on our team, I think it is really logical to pick Zekken too, because the two already work really well together. And I think the calling of Def is what allows Cryo and Zekken to be as loose as they are. He knows the strengths of his team is in letting them frag, letting them go wild, and keeping that strong core of Aaron and of himself to be able to clutch up in the end if things go wrong in those plays. BCJ too filling into those shoes. So I think that there is that case to be made, that we already have a really good IGL that fits well to the play style. But if it's a flash in the pan for Accru, which I don't think it is, I think they'll still come through and qualify.
Me too.
I still am on the Konpeki train.
Yeah. Well, just to add on to the Accru train as well, right? So, people may think of them as like being an underdog and not necessarily like a fluke to make it how far that they did, but they did make it a lot deeper than people thought. But you have to think about Accru, man. They won 30 matches, 30 series in a row before they actually lost into like the Mickey Mouse event for Valorant page
against Cloud9 Blue.
Cloud9,
exactly.
yeah.
And then who are the
Ancient
two
Beds.
teams they lost to in this event? Version 1. It wasn't the closest game. Version 1 had that under control. But I think Version 1, they had the cleanest run into challengers. They didn't drop a map.
Rounds they dropped was 8 on a
Yeah.
map.
Yeah, they kept people in single digits.
Yeah.
Yep. And they lost to the Guard in a fashion that it wasn't the closest game ever, but they had a really competitive Haven to start off. There's a world where a couple rounds swing the other way, they win that Haven match, and there's a chance that they qualify on in. I don't think you can look at a Cruise run and say that it was a fluke.
I mean,
in any way.
It was
off of their
convincing.
tier 2 experience.
It was convincing.
Every other game was
versus TSM.
convincing. They obliterated TSM. They played a better game. TSM counterpicked them and thought they were being all big brain and lost regardless. So I think I just want to I want to give him a player. I want to give him that credit.
I think if there's a time, I think that like Zekken is one of those kind of players that can pop off and do it all. There's still room to grow for him, I think, is the main thing. But yeah, like
that's a good thing.
Konpeki still can do the same. It's just more that nobody was looking in his direction to be a real like world changer, not only when it comes to like how his team was playing and how he was, but also how his team is looking to innovate in ways that nobody else is. Again, that's not up to Konpeki necessarily. That's like the coaching staff and the rest of the team and the calling, but he is iconized himself, I suppose, as a player. So I'm willing to drop the Zekken argument in favor of Konpeki. I also think just like not every player has to come from a team that qualified, and I think Konpeki, in comparison to where we expected him to be, to where he was, that's the biggest gulf in between anybody, I think. So,
but yeah, you were saying that Konpeki does play some Sky too. So I think
he does. He plays the Sky. He plays the KO. He plays the Sage. He's played the Jet in the past.
You need somebody to flex that much, yeah, probably.
Yeah, by every stretch of the imagination, he is.
Yeah, let's give a bit of love to Konpeki for sure.
Yeah, well, let's talk about then, if we can pencil him in. Let's talk about our duelists, because Alex, you already kind of got your start a little bit in talking about your cryo cells. But I guess quick recap. Why is he so good? Why do you want him?
Just amazing. He's quick. He's good. He's fast. He's snappy. That's all you need. Is he better than? Yay?
Is he better than Som? Because I think Som also had a great tournament.
Som did have
I
a
think
great
statistically Som maybe did a little bit better. I didn't get to see all of NRG's games, and the games that I did see, it wasn't Som playing that well. I also do think to an extent that some stats he farmed against Rise. Like very much so.
And that's what I've casted. That's what I watched, and Som looked really good on that too. But I just think I think that Cryocells, like overall, all of the matches that they've played for Exit, he's been on the top of the charts for every game for Cryocells as well. So I
like Munka Humin on
as well. Very good consistency for Cryocells in this whole tournament versus all the teams that he played against. And there were some tough teams that they had to play against too.
What was your pick then, Mimi, to finish out the Jets mainly?
All right, the Jets. Yeah, pretty much. Say a player. Mr. Spider himself has to be my pick. The guard qualified on through, and I think that this guy performed out of his mind. He was stepping up in such a big way. In every crucial series, it was always Saya being so huge in those opening duels. And sure, he had a great supportive line. Trent helping him out, Jonah P helping him out. But at the end of the day, yes, a Jet player is only as good as their supports, but when he needed to, this guy could clutch. He was very fearless in the entries and had a very high success rate doing so. Even if maybe it wasn't quite as flashy, if it wasn't quite as crazy as Cryo, what Saya showed me is that he can still be just a team player. He doesn't have to be, and I'm not saying Cryo isn't, he doesn't always have to be that hard entry, go crazy Jet. He can relax a little bit. He can play the op really well. He can rifle really well. He showed a lot of flexibility within this Jet role. His blade storms were on point and won a couple crucial eco rounds for guard off of them. So overall, it again kind of applies back to that thing for me, like, this player coming into it, what did we expect? What did we get out of it? I was expecting him to do well. I think he performed above my expectations. And I mean, Vansilli, I know you're smirking right now because you predicted that the guard would qualify, and you knew it the whole time.
Sleeping on the guard.
He still surprised me by how good he was, and I think that's why I'd want to give him a spot.
Yeah, I have an analogy for Saya player this event.
Go for it.
Because in the past, like with him like playing on T1 as Spider on the Omen, there was the whole constant joke that he had only unlocked wine on Ascent because that's all he played. I feel like you remember when the Final Fantasy like 14 MMO came out and it was trash, and then the like Square Enix was like, this isn't good enough, we're actually going to bring it back, rework everything, and then they brought out the Final Fantasy MMO that everybody loved. That is Saya player as a player. Like, it's almost like, this isn't good enough, we're actually going to retract Spider, like we're not going to let him play, we're going to work on it internally, and then we're going to put out something better for the fans. And he rebranded even back from Spider to Saya player, and that was in line from an Overwatch League perspective from me. That's the player that I was looking for to perform. Again, kind of like Mimi said, it's just not necessarily as the insane Kellogg's level of aim, just clicking on people, being super in your face as if he's playing Widowmaker. It was just the structure overall from the guard. Despite not going through the upper bracket and having a couple of grievances here or there, I really liked how they played as a team. It wasn't, I think everybody on that roster isn't the biggest world-class name in their role, but when they play together, it doesn't matter if you
feels like
the
they'll
best
be
Jet in the world. It doesn't matter if you have the best Silver with like Trent or whatever, because everybody plays so well together. They're beating teams with world-class players on them anyway. So I think even with all that said, I like that we sort of highlighted Som, who was a player, same sort of story, moved away from the Jet, went on to Omen, rumors of him being benched, and now he's back on the Jet and performing. Side players doing the same. I think for me, Cryo living up to the performance that people were hoping to see from him in such a big event, and in the first event that we've really seen him for XSET, there's nobody close to him as a nomination, I don't think.
Yeah, and when it came down to that head versus head in the matchup between XSET and the guard, Cryo wiped the floor with Saya and with the guard as a whole. He ended that series at 2-0, going 40, and he was plus 16 in the entire series against the guard, which is incredibly impressive for how well they did. And I don't always love to be a stats Andy, but he was also had nearly double the next best player in opening duel success rate. He was looking so good in so many of these rounds, and as much as I was impressed by Saya and as good as he did in this event, I think Cryo just lived up to the hype and wowed, and he was the change XSET needed. I really like Pure R. I like Bryce. He's a good guy. He's not a bad player by any means, but he doesn't have that tense level.
Oh, you know him by his first name?
Yeah, I know pro players like that. I know pro players. No, but I don't think he was living up to that El Diablo, up to that tens, that Leaf. And XSET needed something because they have always been kind of cucked into this 5th place. Now I think they have the player to help them escape that rut.
And funny enough, because I did the scoreboard, Steven, same thing as Mimi when I was like, yeah, head to head. But I looked at head to head between Energy and XSET. And when you're looking at Cryocells versus Som in 1v1s or duels, Som actually outdueled Cryocells 13-8 as well. So
Really?
yeah, so when it comes down to like maybe to see what's going on, we'll have to revisit those to see if you really want to compare apples to apples to see how it was going for performances. But I mean, there's a lot more factors.
But
that
I
goes
think
into it, right?
on a whole, Cryo had consistency. Some did
agreed,
not.
agreed.
Are we underappreciating Penny? He's the one jet that we haven't highlighted from the
I
qualified teams.
think we absolutely are, because I was a Penny hater post Iceland.
Okay.
I'm gonna be honest. I was like, what happened to Penny? Where'd my land Penny go? He disappeared. But he came back this event. It was the first time where I was like, God damn, this looks like the Penny that we used to get to watch. And he looked really impressive doing so for version 1. He was fragging out of his mind. His team was helping set him up. But the reason that I still think we should pick Cryo over him was because there's never been a dip in form for Cryo cells thus far. Even when he was on lower level teams, he was still going mental. And now, when he's here, he can live up to that exact same hype. This guy has not stumbled yet, and I don't know. I don't see him slowing down in this first qualifier. This XSET team is really motivated, and I think that Cryo's going to be the big reason if they do come out on top.
That's the crazy part too, because I do remember when Zekin first joined XSET, right, and they were playing into the qualifiers, and then XSET lost because they couldn't make it to the main events. But Zekin tweeted out, "Rough start, but I'm happy that I'm still able to hang with the best." And then CryoCells, though, when he joins into this qualifier, he's already at the best, like already owning up the server. Where he didn't need like that much time to be like, oh, let me just refocus and recompose myself.
Yeah, and that's not to look down on Zekin.
Of course
Most players
not.
need that warm up time when they're pivoting into like the high level tier 1 games. But it's just crazy that Cryo didn't. It shows just a ton of natural talent. I think XSET did a really good job of integrating him in. To be honest, it's not that hard to integrate a jet, but still, you hyped up the Cryo Zekin duo a lot, and it worked well.
You're on jet this map. Okay, sure. That's fine.
What about Ascent?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have you play jet.
Yeah.
Even on the maps where it's like, we really need a raise. Cryo, you still play jet.
Yeah.
They're just working around it.
Are we just talking about TSM and Chamber here?
Yeah, it feels like it. What else? Like, I have actually locked all of the other agents. They write me money because I don't need to play these other agents anymore. Even the ones I get for free, I just have Chamber unlocked. So we have our 5, I think, for the week. So the Sentinel player, we've gone for Net from the Guard.
Okay.
The controller, I guess IGL would be Depth from XSET. FEs would be our Initiator, mostly on that Silver Breach if you're playing a bit of Fractured Air over from version 1. Kanpeki on fucking everything. For whatever you need, he's on it. He's playing like Mercy as well in this game. He's just bringing in the Winston and the Reinhardt when necessary.
Yeah, he's actually hopping over to Yasuo when they're playing too. So,
and Cryo from XSET on the jet. We don't have any players from NRG on this list. Are there any last minute like additions that could make it, or do you think that there's no better than those 5?
I think this is the team. I think honorable mention though, we should put David Denis in as the coach. I think a last hurrah. The guy was clearly doing well with his coaching. Put him in there.
He highlighted a big problem when it comes to Toronto's infrastructure and sewerage.
Yeah.
We do need to help and support our sewers as much as possible. At least that's what I took from it.
Eglinton is still taking years and years to get built. Eglinton Street to be rebuilt. But man, I don't know. No energy players. And then now, like we talked about some a bit, but what about Android, man? What about Android over net?
I think they're all so close to all be nominated. Like Trex as the Flex, EU as the Initiator, Hazed as the Controller. Like they're all on the cusp.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's
I'm happy with this.
I'm excited to see where that team goes. I'm a big fan of like NRG as an organization, and so seeing everything come together the way that it has is really exciting. But I do think that these are the players that really sort of shone a light on NA.
I think what I like about this team is that I think we're putting a proper amount of gamble on young players. We're putting in Konpeki, we're putting in Net, who are really much newer to this tier 1 level, but we're both performing. And I think that there's the veteran makeup to help them thrive in Def and in FEs. And then Cryo, he doesn't need mentorship.
No.
I think he'll be fine.
Yeah.
I think he'll be fine.
That's a go kill kind of thing, so it's all good. It's all good. I'm actually happy with this team. I mean, I'm actually happier with the team that I've chosen from the beginning, because just with everything that you just mentioned, Mimi, it's basically how I built that.
Who'd you have? Steel, Xander, Trent, Cryo, Jonah?
Yeah.
Pretty good team.
I'd be happy with that.
I think our team's better, though. I think our team's better.
We'll have to put in the simulation.
For both of you, seeing as the second week of qualifiers are on, they haven't started yet as of this recording. I like this question. Who do you think is a player that's likely to make the list next week?
Ooh.
Who do we have that has not qualified? Neon from Accrue is going to be my choice. I thought he had really good games on Jet. I don't know if he'll necessarily be the 100% standout, but I think he can be a big game changer for that squad. And he was fragging amongst the best of them and going up head to head in that TSM game. He was consistently shutting down Wardell in the op-to-op head to heads, and he was looking impressive doing so. So I think he's going to be one of the players that I'm hoping will continue with that step up and that we can look at for next week.
Mine will have to be somebody that probably people don't think about. Is probably Jaesung from Sonics.
Who is Jaesung?
Jaesung actually played with Carp and Noctem in like the tier 2 scene for like
when they
quite a while.
upset Envy, if you remember that. And they also upset. Well, they didn't upset Envy. They got really close to doing it, but they upset 100 Thieves a while back with him.
That's it. And then they got the revenge. That was like what? Not first strike, but maybe even Masters 1 qualifier.
That was like really late 2020.
Okay. Yeah, so anyways, Copy Noctem, very, very good team of like Zid and a couple of guys that are like 1.6 players in Counter-Strike. And then Jason's kind of like new in this roster as like one of the young fraggers. And he actually got recently picked up by Sonics. I think he's still trialing with Sonics right now because I don't think
he's signed.
He's signed now? Okay, perfect. So he's signed to Sonics. And I think just most recently, looking at how Sonics played in the open qualifier, what really perked my ears and had me look at this team under the scope is that they were playing no Duelist. So they were playing very similar to like FPX style, no Duelist, but still able to qualify very, very deeply. A lot of people are going to say it's kind of troll that they're not using Duelist, but to see that G-Sung's able to put a lot of these numbers up very, very highly as a KO as well. And even in the Winter Championships that just happened yesterday, I was watching that game too, and this man is going to be a great, great addition to Sonics. And I think he's going to be one of those players that finally people are going to start watching because he's in a good structure with Sonics, a team that came from Australia, 5-player roster from Australia that didn't work out. They brought in now Miniature and Jaesung, and now we're seeing that they're having these deep runs. So I think with this upward path that they're heading towards to, you'll start seeing Jaesung a lot more.
I got Derek OW.
That was the other one I was about to say.
True.
Yeah.
True.
I think it's one of those things where like Rise disappointed where it mattered in those qualifying games.
Derek was the only one that played.
He was the only one that played, and I think that when you look at the other teams that could qualify, I think Rise really should be qualifying at this point because it seems that it's just that last threshold you have to get over. Everything else was straightforward. I would like to see like TSM and T1 make it just for the memes alone at this point, but I'd be shocked, and it'd almost be funny if Rise didn't qualify because they very much could have, but they just shit the bed in the big games. And Derek looks
let me bring up a player that their team's performance didn't back it up at all. But I want to talk about Rhyme. He gets imported onto this Gen G squad.
Yeah, Gen G.
And he pops off like crazy. Gen G sucks. They really suck. But he popped off like crazy. And he looked good on the Jet. He was good in EU. He's good over here. If Gen G can rally and play a better game in next week's quals, I think Rhyme will be one of the biggest reasons that happens. So I'm excited. I'm hoping Gen G does better because I was very, very underwhelmed with them. But still, it was a good debut out of him.
I had them qualifying,
individually.
And they dropped so early.
Yeah, it was like instant. Yeah. They lost to Renegades, didn't they?
Yeah.
Or
Sonics.
No, they lost to Sonics, but they dropped a map to Renegades, which probably shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
I think that's the team then. That's our 5 to highlight for this week. I cannot wait to see what happens next week, not only for the players, but just anything could happen at this point. It's been 1 week of NA and it's
exactly.
Shit hit the fan. But thank you very much for joining us, Vansilli. All of your stuff is linked in the description. Anything else that you want to shout out, do so now.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Fantastic. Bye, everybody. See you next week.
Bye.